Not even she could have imagined what would come next. If this story has already captured your attention in the first few seconds, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Leave a like. It helps the channel grow and continue bringing more emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone special, and get ready to be moved. The suffocating air inside Techline Solutions' 15th floor wrapped itself around Samantha Miller like a humid shroud. The broken air conditioning had turned the glass-walled office into a slow-cooking oven, and the late July heat in Manhattan made everything worse. Samantha, 23, felt her blouse stick to her back like a second skin. She tried adjusting it discreetly, but nothing helped. Sweat pooled at the base of her neck, her cheeks burned, not just from the heat, but from the gnawing anxiety that gripped her chest. She had just received a cryptic email. "Mr. Bennett would like to see you in his office. Immediately." Richard Bennett wasn't a man who called assistants into his office casually. He was Techline's regional director, a man of few words and sharp eyes. In his early 50s, always polished, his voice was calm, like still water, but his presence carried the weight of a man who had built empires and buried competitors with the same cold precision. Samantha took a breath, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward his office with steady steps. Every click of her heels echoed louder than usual across the floor. Her reflection in the glass revealed a woman composed on the outside, low bun, modest heels, fitted blouse, but inside a storm had begun to brew. When she knocked, the door opened with a low hum. "Come in," Richard said, not looking up. She stepped inside, the chill of his office a sharp contrast to the sweltering corridor. Apparently his air conditioning worked just fine. He gestured for her to sit. "I'll get straight to it," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "There's a position I'd like to put your name forward for." Samantha blinked. "A position?" He nodded. "At Innovate Corp, assistant to the director, George Whitman." Her heart skipped. Innovate Corp wasn't just a step up, it was a leap. It was where real careers were forged, where people doubled or tripled their income and never looked back. Her mind struggled to keep pace as he continued. $15,000 a month, full health coverage, international travel, and the kind of access that opens every door. She couldn't stop the gasp that escaped her lips. "I've worked with Whitman before," Richard went on. "He trusts me. If I tell him you're ready, you'll get the interview." She nodded slowly, trying to process. "I don't know what to say, thank you." But the curve of his smile stopped her short. It wasn't kindness. It was calculation. "There is," he said, voice lowering. "One thing." Her stomach tightened. "George is particular," Richard said, drawing out the word. "He likes his executive assistants to have a certain kind of presence, maturity, confidence, life experience." She tilted her head. "Life experience?" He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "He wants someone who has lived a little, who isn't naive." Samantha's skin prickled. There was something in his tone, an implication she couldn't quite place, or perhaps didn't want to. "I've seen your resume, Samantha. Your academic record is spotless. Your evaluations here are strong, but George values instinct, sophistication, a kind of personal readiness." The air between them thickened. She narrowed her eyes. "You're suggesting I'm not ready?" "I'm suggesting you may want to consider presenting yourself differently if this job matters to you." Silence. The fluorescent lights above seemed to hum louder as she processed the subtext. He wasn't talking about skills. He wasn't even talking about work. Her mind raced to all the ways a man like George Whitman might screen a candidate. Experience of life, personal readiness. Then came the moment she would replay in her mind for days to come. Richard shifted forward, voice quieter now. "Forgive me for being blunt, but your file includes notes on your background, your upbringing, even your social history." Her breath caught in her throat. "You're smart, Samantha, but you're still very—" He paused. "Sheltered." The word struck her like a slap. "How do you know anything about my personal life?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain calm. He raised his eyebrows. "We run background checks. It's not about judgment. It's about fit. George won't say it out loud, but I know what he looks for. A woman who carries herself like she's been through the world. You're young, innocent even. That's not always a strength in his eyes. Her fingers curled into fists on her lap. So, Richard finished, if you want this opportunity, think about what story you want to tell when you walk into that room. Think about how you want to present yourself. You have 5 days. He turned back to his screen. The conversation was over. Samantha stood on shaky legs and walked out without a word. Her skin burned, but not from the heat this time. Inside the restroom, she leaned on the sink and stared into the mirror. Was this what it meant to be a woman in this world? Measured not by merit, but by some fabricated measure of maturity defined by men. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes wide, heartbroken, humiliated. And yet, beneath all of it, something shifted. Not rage. Not yet. But something else. A decision forming. That night, in her tiny apartment in Brooklyn, she lay awake in the dark, her phone clutched in her hand. She thought of all the sacrifices she'd made to get this far. All the times she'd chosen safety over risk, silence over honesty. She opened her messages. There was only one person she could call. One person who knew every version of her, from playground secrets to post-college failures. One person who never judged her, even when she couldn't understand herself. Nathan Brooks. Heir to a business empire, her best friend, the one man she had never dared to see through any other lens. Her thumb hovered above the keyboard. She hesitated. Then, heart-pounding, she typed, "Nathan, I need to talk to you tonight." She hit send and waited for the moment that would change everything. The night had folded itself over Manhattan like a velvet curtain, muffling the usual sounds of the city. Samantha stood in front of the towering glass building on the Upper West Side, her reflection fragmented by the entrance's double doors. It was nearly 11 p.m., and the streets were quieter than usual. Just a passing cab, a flickering street lamp, and the weight of her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. She had taken 3 trains and walked 12 blocks to get there. She could have taken a cab. Nathan would have sent a car if she'd asked, but walking made it feel like a decision, like she was claiming something, though she still didn't fully understand what. Her message had been simple. "Nathan, I need to talk to you. Tonight." He had replied almost instantly, "Of course, come whenever you want." Now standing in front of his building, she hesitated. What was she even doing? The doorman recognized her and let her in without a word. Her heels clicked against the marble lobby floor as she made her way to the private elevator, one that led straight to the penthouse. She had only been there a few times before, usually for holidays or the occasional celebration. Never like this. Never at this hour. Never with this kind of storm swirling inside her chest. When the elevator doors opened, Nathan was already there. He wore a navy hoodie and grey sweatpants, barefoot, a glass of water in his hand. His dark hair was tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes, those warm hazel eyes, immediately searched hers for something unspoken. "Sammy," he said softly, "what happened?" She stepped inside, suddenly unsure how to begin. The scent of sandalwood lingered in the air, familiar and comforting. The penthouse was dimly lit, quiet, almost reverent. A record played faintly in the background. Miles Davis, she thought, but her thoughts were too loud to notice. He set his glass down and gestured toward the couch. "Sit with me?" She nodded, following him into the living room. The city stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like a sea of stars. She sat stiffly on the edge of the couch while he folded his legs beside her, concern carved into every angle of his face. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice low. His brows lifted slightly. "Anything?" "No." She shook her head. I need to ask you something that might ruin everything." Nathan leaned forward. "You're scaring me." She took a breath, then another. Her fingers twisted in her lap. "I was offered a job," she said, trying to steady her voice. "A huge one. At Innovate Corp executive assistant to the director." Nathan smiled. "Sammy, that's incredible. But there's a catch." The smile faded. She told him everything. About Richard, about the suggestion that she wasn't experienced enough, about the implication that her value as a professional somehow hinged on something no one had the right to even consider. Nathan listened without interruption, his hands clasped together between his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. And then came the part she had rehearsed in her mind over and over on the train, but still felt impossible to say aloud. "They want someone with life experience," she whispered, "and I realized that if I don't change how I'm seen, I'll never be chosen for something like this." Nathan's expression darkened. "That's disgusting. It's illegal. I know," she cut in, "but that's not why I came here." She looked at him, throat tight. "I came because I want it to be you." Silence fell between them, so heavy it almost cracked the glass windows behind them. He stared at her, unmoving. "What?" he said, barely above a breath. "I want you to be the first. I trust you, and I don't want to go through this with someone I don't know, someone who doesn't care about me." Nathan sat back slowly, as if her words had knocked the wind from his lungs. "Samantha, you don't mean that." "I do." She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. "It's not just about the job anymore. It's about me taking control, doing something I choose for once." Nathan ran a hand over his face, standing abruptly. He walked to the window, staring out, then turned back to her. "Do you hear yourself?" he asked gently. "You're scared, you're angry, you're hurt, and you think that giving something away will make you feel stronger, but Sammy, this isn't you." "I'm not a child," she snapped, the crack in her voice betraying the tears building behind her eyes. "I've spent my whole life waiting, always waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right version of myself. But when does that moment come?" His voice softened. "It comes when you're not trying to prove something to someone who doesn't matter." She stood now, too, facing him. "You matter," she said. "You've always mattered. You're the only one I've ever trusted. That has to mean something." "It does," he whispered. "God, it does." They stood inches apart. The air between them felt charged, like something had cracked open after years of being sealed tight. Her eyes searched his, pleading, determined, terrified. His hands hovered near her shoulders, unsure whether to reach out or retreat. "I don't want to take advantage of your pain," he said, voice shaking, "and I don't want to be something you regret." "You won't be," she said. "You could never be." For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the city, the music, the lights, it all fell away. There was only this room, this moment, this boundary neither of them had ever dared to cross. He touched her cheek, thumb brushing against her jaw. She leaned into his palm like she'd done 100 times before, but never like this, never with her heart so open, her soul so exposed. "I need time," he said finally. "Not because I don't want this, but because I do. More than you know." Her eyes widened, and something flickered behind them, something she hadn't expected. Then softly he added, "I've wanted you for years, Samantha, but not like this. Not in pain, not in desperation. I want you in love." It had been 3 days since that night in Nathan's penthouse, and Samantha couldn't stop replaying it in her mind, his hands trembling as they hovered near her, the honesty in his voice, the heat in the silence that stretched between them. He hadn't touched her, not in the way she expected, but something inside her had shifted forever. Since then, they had only exchanged a few texts, kind, safe, careful. She hated how awkward it felt now, when for years being with Nathan had been effortless. He had been her safe place, her anchor. But now her feelings were tangled. Every memory between them looked different under this new light, and for the first time she wasn't sure if he still saw her the same way. On Saturday evening, Nathan sent her a message. Dinner, just us, no pressure. Just reading it made her chest flutter. He was trying, gently, slowly, giving her space but not letting her drift too far. It was exactly what she needed. They met at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in Greenwich Village, a place they used to go during college whenever they needed to escape the noise of the world. It was dimly lit, with flickering candles on the tables and the scent of roasted garlic hanging in the air. The kind of place where the walls whispered stories and nothing needed to be rushed. Nathan was already seated when she arrived, wearing a black button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, fingers tracing the edge of his glass. When he looked up and saw her, something softened in his face. Relief. Admiration. Something else she couldn't yet name. "You came," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied, slipping into the seat across from him. "But then I remembered the tiramisu here." He smiled, but his eyes stayed on her a little longer than usual, like he was memorizing her, or maybe daring himself to say what needed to be said. The conversation started light. Work, news, the absurd heat wave. But underneath the surface, tension hummed like a quiet current. Every word, every laugh, felt like they were standing on a tightrope, stretched over something deeper. Midway through the pasta, he finally said it. "Samantha, I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night." She looked up, fork pausing mid-air. "I wanted to be angry," he continued. "Angry that you'd ask me something like that you'd reduce it to a transaction, but I couldn't be." "Why not?" she asked, voice quieter now. "Because I knew why you asked, and because deep down, I wanted to say yes." Her chest tightened. "I've been in love with you since we were 13, he said, just like that. No build-up, no dramatics, just truth, laid bare. The candle flickered between them. Samantha blinked, stunned into stillness. "What?" "I loved you when you wore braces and swore you'd marry a rock star. I loved you when you broke your ankle at prom and made me slow dance with you in crutches. I loved you when you got your first job and called me crying because you thought you'd ruined everything on day one." She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. "You never said anything," she whispered. "I couldn't," he said. "You saw me as your best friend. I didn't want to lose that, so I told myself it was enough. That I'd rather have part of you than nothing at all." Samantha's heart ached at the quiet pain in his voice. "I thought you didn't see me that way," she confessed. "I never imagined—" He smiled softly. "You were always chasing something bigger. College, jobs, dreams. I didn't want to be one more thing pulling you off course." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. "Why now?" she asked. "Because now I see you clearly. Not the girl I loved in silence. The woman in front of me, brave, complicated, hurting, and still the most important person in my life." She looked away, struggling to catch her breath. Every part of her wanted to run, to protect what they had, to avoid wrecking the foundation they had built over so many years. But another part, the part that had felt his hand on her cheek that night, the part that had sent that message in desperation and hope, that part whispered stay. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice trembling. "I know," he said. "So am I." She met his eyes again, and in them she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Safety. Not the comfort of friendship, not anymore. This was something new, something real. Nathan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. A soft, tentative touch. An invitation. They sat in silence for a moment, the world around them fading into background noise. And then Samantha spoke, barely above a breath. "I don't think I can go back to the way things were." His thumb traced the back of her hand. "Neither can I." But neither of them said what came next, because some truths, once spoken, cannot be undone, and some feelings, once uncovered, refuse to stay buried. It was raining in Manhattan, the kind of rain that softened the city's edges, blurring streetlights into gold halos and muffling the chaos with a hush that felt almost sacred. Samantha stood under the awning of Nathan's building, watching the droplets race each other down the glass door. Her coat was damp at the hem, her hair slightly frizzy from the humidity, but she didn't care. She wasn't here by accident. Nathan had texted earlier that day. "Dinner at my place, I'll cook, no pressure." Just like before, no pressure. But this time she felt it, the weight of all they hadn't said, the weight of everything they had just begun to uncover. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Her heart beat louder with every floor, her mind rewriting and undoing what she might say. And when the doors opened, he was already there, barefoot in dark jeans and a charcoal grey shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes soft with something she hadn't seen in a long time. Invitation without expectation. "Hey," he said, his voice like velvet. "Hey," she echoed. The apartment smelled like rosemary and garlic, warm and grounding. Jazz hummed in the background, candles flickered along the kitchen island. Everything was simple, intimate, intentional. He handed her a glass of wine without a word. Their fingers touched briefly. Warm, electric. Samantha sipped slowly, trying to steady her nerves. The past week had been a whirlwind of emotional revelations, unexpected truths, and sleepless nights. But tonight felt different. Still, waited, like they were standing at the edge of something neither of them could name yet. They sat down to eat. Her favorite lemon herb salmon, grilled asparagus, roasted potatoes. Nathan had remembered every detail. She smiled between bites, letting the familiarity of the food anchor her. "You're quiet," he said gently. She looked up. "I'm thinking." "Dangerous," he teased. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I keep asking myself if this is real," she said. "What part?" "All of it. Us. This shift. It feels like the ground moved beneath my feet and I'm still trying to find where to stand." Nathan leaned back in his chair, watching her. "It is real, but I know it's scary." She nodded. "You've always been my safe place, and now I feel like I'm seeing you for the first time, and I don't know what to do with everything I'm feeling." He stood and walked around the table, pulling her gently to her feet. "You don't have to do anything," he whispered. "Not tonight. Not ever. Unless you want to." She looked up at him, the flickering candlelight dancing in his eyes. There was no pressure in his touch, no urgency, just warmth, just him. "I do want to," she said, her voice barely audible. "But not because of the job, not because I need to prove something, because I finally see you too. And I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. He led her toward the living room, slow and patient. The world outside continued to fall away, one heartbeat at a time. The city, the pressure, the noise, none of it mattered here. Samantha felt his hand rest gently on her waist, his thumb brushing the small of her back. Her breath caught. Her pulse thrummed in her ears. She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He closed his eyes at her touch, leaning into it like it was something holy. And then, finally, their lips met. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, almost hesitant, as if both were memorizing the feeling, storing it somewhere sacred. A kiss that didn't demand anything, but gave everything. He pulled her closer, and she felt her body mold to his, as if this had always been meant. The heat between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, soul-deep, centuries old. When he whispered her name, it sounded like prayer. "Samantha." She looked at him, eyes wide, breath shaky. I know," he said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's why I'm here. That's why I'll be patient." Every second, the tenderness in his voice undid her. She nodded, eyes glistening. They moved together in quiet harmony. His fingertips trailed reverently across her skin, as if he was learning a language he already knew by heart. She responded not with words, but with trust, allowing him to guide her through the vulnerability she had feared for so long. Time seemed to fold. There was no before, no after. Just the now. Just the softness of lips against skin, the hushed whispers in the dark, the warmth of two bodies letting go of all the walls they had built for years. In his arms, Samantha didn't feel inexperienced. She felt powerful, wanted, loved. And Nathan, he didn't take anything from her. He gave. He gave her silence when words were too much. He gave her stillness when the moment trembled. He gave her space when her eyes filled with tears. And he held her like he'd waited a lifetime to be allowed. After, they lay wrapped in the quiet, the storm still whispering against the windows, the candlelight casting gold across the ceiling. Samantha rested her head against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heart. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of what might come next. But even in that peace, one question lingered in the stillness. Now that they had crossed the line, could they ever go back? The sun peeked through the blinds of Samantha's bedroom, casting slanted golden lines across the sheets tangled at her feet. She lay awake, eyes wide open, heartbeat slow but heavy. The quiet hum of a new morning wrapped around her like a hesitant promise, one she wasn't quite sure how to interpret yet. Last night had been everything. More than passion. More than surrender. It had been connection, undeniable, irreversible, a shift that reached beyond flesh and bone, something that lived in the space between trust and desire. Samantha hadn't expected to feel so changed, and yet when Nathan held her after, his breathing steady, his fingers brushing softly along her spine, she had felt more like herself than ever before. Now, the reality of the day crept in. It was Monday, the day of her interview with George Whitman, and though the memory of Richard Bennett's veiled insinuations still lingered at the edges of her mind like smoke, Samantha no longer felt like the girl who had stood in front of his desk trembling. Something inside her had cracked open, and in the breaking she had discovered a kind of strength she never knew she carried. By 8 a.m., she was dressed in a sleek navy suit, tailored to perfection, paired with nude heels and a pearl earring that once belonged to her mother. Her hair was pulled back into a low twist, not because she wanted to look older, but because she wanted to look deliberate. She wasn't trying to convince anyone of her worth anymore. She was simply showing up as who she truly was. Nathan had left a note on her kitchen counter. "No matter what happens, you already won. Proud of you. N." She folded it carefully and tucked it into her bag like a secret talisman. The building that housed Innovate Corp was intimidating, even from the outside. Its modern steel and glass facade reflected the sky in fragments, like a mirror fractured by ambition. Inside, the lobby stretched upward in silence and prestige. Everything gleamed. Everyone moved with purpose. At the 24th floor, Samantha stepped out into a hallway lined with soft lighting and textured grey walls. The receptionist greeted her by name, offering a warm smile as she gestured toward a door. "Mr. Whitman is ready for you." Her pulse kicked. She took a breath, squared her shoulders and stepped inside. George Whitman was not what she expected. He was in his 60s, balding, wearing wireframe glasses and a navy vest over a crisp shirt. He stood when she entered, extending a hand that was firm but not aggressive. His eyes, sharp, intelligent, studied her with an intensity that suggested nothing escaped him. "Ms. Miller," he said, "have a seat." The next 45 minutes were a blur of questions, observations, and challenges. He asked about her past roles, her approach to pressure, how she handled difficult executives, last-minute changes, broken systems. But he also asked unexpected things. What do you value in loyalty? When do you know you're in the right room? What do you do when your intuition disagrees with your logic? Samantha answered honestly, without rehearsed lines. She didn't pretend to be more experienced than she was. Instead, she spoke with clarity, with quiet confidence that didn't scream to be noticed, but demanded to be respected. At one point, Whitman leaned back in his chair and watched her for a long beat. "Mr. Bennett said you might not be ready," he said finally. "Said you lacked certain worldly perspectives." Her breath caught just for a moment, but she didn't flinch. "I've lived a different kind of experience," she replied calmly. "One that taught me how to read people, how to adapt, how to listen. That's what matters in this role. You don't need someone who's been everywhere. You need someone who knows when to speak and when to hear what wasn't said." He smiled, small but real. When the interview ended, he stood and offered his hand again. "You'll hear from us soon." But as Samantha stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. It was from the HR department. "Congratulations, the position is yours. Please check your inbox for your offer letter and onboarding documents." She read the message twice, then again, the words almost surreal. People walked past her, busy, indifferent, but Samantha stood motionless, hand clutching her phone, eyes wide with disbelief and awe. This moment didn't feel like a win over others. It felt like a homecoming, a return to the self she had buried beneath fear and expectation. When she finally stepped outside, the sun had fully risen. The rain from the weekend had cleared, leaving the sidewalks damp but glistening. She paused on the corner, letting the breeze lift a strand of hair from her cheek. It wasn't the job that filled her with emotion. It was what the job symbolized. She hadn't earned this because she compromised. She hadn't been chosen because she became what others expected her to be. She had been chosen because she finally dared to be herself. Later that night, she sat in her apartment alone, laptop open, reading through the offer letter. The salary made her blink, $15,000 per month. Private health, global travel, a future far beyond what she'd allowed herself to dream. But all she could think about was Nathan. How he had looked at her, how he had waited, how he had seen her. Not just that night, but always. She picked up her phone to call him, then paused. Would he still be waiting on the other side of this new chapter? It had only been 12 days. 12 days since Samantha signed the contract, smiled in the hallway of Innovate Corp, and stepped into a new version of herself. 12 days since her mornings began with espresso in a glass office overlooking the Hudson, and her nights ended with text messages from Nathan that made her heart ache in the sweetest way. Everything had been moving, fast, exhilarating, full of color. Until the morning, the silence started to feel wrong. Samantha arrived at the Innovate building just after 8 a.m. as usual. The lobby felt quieter than normal. The front desk receptionist avoided her eyes, offering only a faint nod. Elevators that were normally buzzing with junior executives and legal assistants now moved sluggishly, with empty, mirrored walls reflecting her own unease back at her. On the 24th floor, the energy was different. Phones were silent. People whispered near water coolers and disappeared behind glass conference doors that had never been closed before. Her desk, pristine and carefully organized, felt suddenly fragile, like a set piece waiting to be torn down. She sat, opened her laptop, and tried to log in. Access denied. She froze. Tried again. Same result. Her stomach dropped. Before she could move, her direct supervisor, Elisa, appeared beside her desk, her expression unreadable. "Hey, Samantha, can you come with me for a moment?" No explanation, no smile, just the chill of something unraveling. They walked in silence to a small, nondescript meeting room at the far end of the floor. Inside, a man from HR and a woman in legal were already waiting, both with folders in front of them and tight, polite expressions. Samantha sat slowly, her heart now thudding in her ears. Elisa took the seat beside her. "First, I want to say this isn't about you," Elisa said, her voice calm but rehearsed. "You've done nothing wrong." Then the man from HR spoke. "As of this morning, Innovate Corp's executive board has frozen all hiring activities following a federal investigation into George Whitman's financial conduct." The words landed like bricks. "Wait, what?" "Mr. Whitman was taken into custody early this morning. There are allegations of fraud, embezzlement, and insider trading. It's a developing case." Samantha blinked, stunned. Elisa leaned forward. "Unfortunately, all recent hires under his division are being reviewed. Legally, we're required to suspend your position until further notice." "Suspended?" she echoed. The woman from legal shook her head gently. "Given the nature of the investigation, we have to treat the contracts as invalid. Mr. Whitman acted outside of policy. Until the board decides how to proceed, all job offers made within the last 30 days are nullified." Samantha's breath caught in her chest. "So, I don't have a job?" A pause. "We're truly sorry," Elisa said. The rest of the conversation blurred. Phrases like severance, reputation management, and cooperation with authorities swirled around her like smoke she couldn't inhale. She nodded mechanically, signed the forms handed to her, and was escorted back to her desk with just enough time to gather her personal items, her plants, her notebook, the card Nathan had tucked into her purse, and she'd pinned to her corkboard. "Go be the fire, you were never meant to stay small." By 10:15 a.m., Samantha was outside on the sidewalk, the wind biting her cheeks, the city moving around her like it hadn't even noticed. She stood still for a long time. The high of a dream fulfilled had crashed with no warning. Her world had flipped in under 2 hours. The version of herself she'd just begun to believe in, the professional, the adult, the woman in control, felt like a costume someone had snatched away. She went home and collapsed on the couch, unable to cry, unable to speak. The silence in the apartment mocked her. Her inbox flooded with news alerts about the scandal. Tech titan arrested in 300mm fraud case. George Whitman allegedly orchestrated decade-long insider trading network. Innovate Corp faces federal freeze and internal collapse. Every headline hit like a fresh blow. By late afternoon, Nathan called. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. She didn't know how to answer. She wanted to tell him everything, to fall into the safety of his voice, to let him remind her who she was, but her shame was louder. And then, unprompted, the thought surfaced, did I sleep with him for nothing? The moment it landed, she recoiled from it, but it was too late. The seed had been planted, not because she believed it, but because the world would. She pressed the phone to her chest and sobbed, guilt flooding her ribs like ice water. She had done something brave, something vulnerable, something real. But now, stripped of the job that had seemed like a symbol of transformation, all she felt was naked, uncertain, fragile. She didn't return Nathan's call, or his second, or the message that came hours later. I'm here, no matter what. Please let me in. She didn't know how to let anyone in anymore, because the door she had opened so wide had slammed shut just as quickly, and Samantha wasn't sure she had the strength to open it again. The days that followed unfolded in slow motion, like pages of a book someone had dropped into water, warped, unreadable, and heavier than they should be. Samantha barely left the apartment. The city outside her window kept spinning, horns blaring, people rushing, lights blinking with no awareness of her stillness. But inside her small Brooklyn walk-up, time had collapsed. Her routines dissolved. Coffee went cold on the counter. Clothes stayed folded in the basket. The mirror gathered dust. Her phone remained silent, not because no one called, but because she didn't answer. Nathan had texted again the morning after the scandal broke. "Please, Sammy, let me come to you." She stared at the message for 10 full minutes, fingers hovering above the screen. But in the end, she turned the phone face down and walked away. It wasn't just the job, it was the shame. She had made a choice, a deeply personal, irreversible choice. And then the very thing that had catalyzed her bravery had turned out to be a lie. It didn't matter that she hadn't slept with Nathan for the job. It still felt like the timing betrayed her, like her emotions had been manipulated by fate itself. Worse, it felt like she had tainted something sacred between them. She knew Nathan wouldn't see it that way. He'd never say those words, but that didn't stop the voice in her own head from whispering it over and over. He probably regrets it too. She avoided her email. Her inbox overflowed with notifications, job sites, recruiter follow-ups, unread HR apologies from Innovate. She couldn't face them. Not yet. Days turned into a week, and then another. The silence between her and Nathan expanded, becoming a presence in itself, like a third person sitting in the room, staring at her every time she considered reaching out. She missed him, desperately, his warmth, his certainty, the way he said her name like it held weight. But how could she face him when all she felt was failure? On the 9th day, she returned to Techline. Walking through those familiar glass doors was like stepping into a dream she'd already outgrown. The air conditioning still overcompensated, the receptionist still chewed gum, and the hum of printers still filled the space with white noise. But Samantha, she wasn't the same. She had been in boardrooms. She had been trusted with million-dollar schedules. She had been kissed like she mattered, touched like she was precious. And now, back at her old desk, none of it fit anymore. She sat stiffly, hands folded, staring at the same spreadsheet she had worked on before everything changed. Richard Bennett passed by once. He didn't say a word, just glanced at her with something unreadable in his expression, perhaps guilt, perhaps satisfaction. She looked away. That afternoon, she checked her phone. No messages. For the first time, Nathan hadn't tried. That night, she stood in front of the mirror, towel wrapped around her, steam rising from the shower still fogging the edges of the glass. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, older, harder, sadder. She traced her fingers over her collarbone, the same place Nathan had kissed when he told her she was brave. That moment felt like another life. Then, impulsively, she typed his number into a new message. "Hey." She stared at it, then deleted it. Typed again. "Thank you for calling that night. Sorry I didn't answer. I wasn't ready." She hit send. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her phone buzzed. "You never have to apologize to me. I'm still here. Always." Tears welled up instantly. But she didn't reply, because still here didn't mean still waiting. and a part of her wondered if it was too late to go back to what they had. A week later, one of her colleagues at TechLine stopped by her desk with a sympathetic smile. "Hey, just wanted to let you know. Saw Nathan last night. Looked like he was with someone." Samantha's body went still. She nodded politely. "Thanks." The colleague left, unaware of the ripple effect those words triggered. She didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, she went home, curled up in bed and stared at the ceiling. If he was seeing someone, she had no right to blame him. She had shut him out, pushed him away, left his messages unanswered. She had done all the things she never imagined she'd do to someone she loved. Loved? Yes. That word was no longer confusing. It wasn't about the night they shared or the history they built. It was about the part of her that still turned toward the door when a knock came, hoping it was him. But silence answered more loudly than footsteps. And in that silence, Samantha was left to reckon with the cost of what she'd lost, not just a job or a title or a dream, but a connection that had carried her through every storm until now. The call came on a Thursday morning. Samantha was halfway through her second cup of coffee, seated at her desk at TechLine, staring blankly at a spreadsheet she'd updated 3 times already. Her eyes were puffy from a restless night, her heart sore from a silence that had now stretched into nearly 2 weeks. Nathan hadn't called again, and she hadn't dared to reach out. The phone in her purse buzzed once, then again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Good morning, Ms. Miller. My name is Rachel Harmon. I'm calling from Harrison & Solutions. We recently received a strong internal referral for an open senior associate position, and your name was presented as a top candidate. Would you be available for a virtual interview this afternoon?" Samantha blinked. I'm sorry. What company did you say?" "Harrison & Solutions," Rachel repeated. "We're a global strategy and consulting firm. We have a Manhattan office, but this role is hybrid flexible, with opportunities to work with international clients." Samantha's pulse picked up. She'd heard of them, of course she had. Harrison was prestigious, selective, the kind of place where people either burned out or built lifelong careers. She'd never applied there. She'd never even dreamed that someone like her would end up on their radar. "I didn't apply," she said slowly. "I understand," Rachel replied. "As I mentioned, it was an internal referral. Extremely strong, I might add." Samantha's heart beat louder. "Do you know who referred me?" "I'm afraid the referral was marked confidential," Rachel said, "but we take those very seriously." A pause. "So, are you available at 2 p.m. today?" Samantha nodded, before realizing she needed to answer out loud. "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, absolutely." When she hung up, her hands trembled. She stood, walked to the break room, and splashed cold water on her face. Her first instinct was suspicion. Why now? How? But beneath the confusion, a small flicker of hope ignited, warm, cautious. She prepared for the interview, like her life depended on it. At 1:58 p.m., she logged into the video call, heart pounding beneath her blouse. Rachel was already there, joined by 2 other panelists, a senior consultant and an operations director. They were sharp, direct, but fair. They asked thoughtful questions about leadership, strategy, human connection. Samantha spoke clearly, honestly. She didn't perform. She shared her setbacks, her lessons, her instincts. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was building something again. When the interview ended, Rachel smiled. "We'll be in touch very soon. Thank you for your time, Samantha." That night she didn't sleep much. She stared at her phone long after midnight, wondering, could it have been him? Nathan? Had he referred her? It seemed absurd. They weren't talking. He might have moved on. But somehow, she knew. The way her name had surfaced so specifically. The tone in Rachel's voice when she said, "extremely strong." It was him. Even from a distance, even in silence, Nathan was still protecting her. 2 days later, the offer came. $18,000 a month. Benefits, international exposure, a promotion in title and responsibility. The kind of offer that didn't just change jobs, it changed lives. Samantha sat at her kitchen table, staring at the PDF, hands covering her mouth. Her chest tightened, not just from disbelief, but from the quiet gratitude that bloomed through the cracks of her self-doubt. She didn't earn this because someone handed it to her. She earned it because someone believed in her enough to open a door, and she had walked through it. Without hesitation, she signed the offer letter that night. Afterwards, she opened a blank message on her phone. Typed, "I got the job, thank you, I know it was you." She stared at it, then deleted it. Typed again, "No one's ever believed in me the way you do, even when I didn't deserve it." Deleted that too. In the end, she sent just 3 words. "Thank you, Nathan," he replied a few minutes later. "You never had to ask." She clutched the phone to her chest. No declarations, no demands, just truth, sent quietly across the bridge of broken things. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, Samantha had learned, were where courage lived. The office of Harrison & Solutions had floor-to-ceiling windows and polished stone floors that echoed softly with every confident step Samantha took. A week into her new role, and she already felt the difference, not just in the view or the paycheck, but in how people listened when she spoke, how she listened to herself. She was thriving. But even as her days filled with strategy meetings, client calls, and late-night presentations, there was one silence she couldn't ignore. Nathan hadn't replied to her last message beyond those quiet words. "You never had to ask." She'd reread them a dozen times. She missed him, not just the comfort of his presence or the old rhythms of their friendship. She missed the version of herself she was when she was with him, unguarded, honest, fully seen. And now that she was finally stable again, finally standing on her own feet, the question that haunted her was simple and terrifying. Had she waited too long? On Friday afternoon, something in her snapped. She left work early under the excuse of a personal matter, grabbed coffee from the shop they used to love on Spring Street, and walked toward the corporate headquarters of Brooks Global, Nathan's family company. She didn't call ahead, didn't overthink it, just showed up. The receptionist smiled politely when Samantha gave her name. "Mr. Brooks is in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here. Please wait in the executive lounge." The lounge was sleek and quiet, with grey velvet chairs and an art piece that looked like wind frozen in motion. Samantha sat, heart pounding, fingers wrapped tightly around the coffee cup she suddenly regretted bringing. After 10 minutes, the door opened, and Nathan walked in. He looked different, not drastically, but in the way that grief and longing and sleepless nights leave behind shadows beneath the eyes. He wore a tailored suit, but the tie was loosened, his shirt slightly creased, his usual calm replaced by something guarded. "Samantha," he said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming." She stood. "I didn't either," she replied softly. I needed to see you." A long silence stretched between them. Then she added, "Thank you for what you did." He nodded slowly. "You earned that job. I just reminded them to look your way." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I've missed you," she said. Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He didn't speak right away. His eyes flicked toward the hallway behind him. And then she saw her. A woman standing just outside the glass wall talking with an assistant. Blonde, elegant, the kind of tailored perfection Samantha had never tried to be. She carried herself like someone used to rooms like this. Lauren Mitchell. Samantha had seen her before, online in articles on Nathan's arm at charity events, and now, seeing her this close, the knot in her stomach twisted tighter. "She works here now?" Samantha asked, voice thin. Nathan's eyes darkened, but he didn't flinch. "She joined the firm last month." "So, you're together?" "I'm trying," he said carefully. "I thought you didn't want to see me. You pushed me away, Sam. I waited. I waited longer than I should have. But people only wait so long before they have to move forward." Samantha swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "I wasn't ready," she whispered. "I know. I was ashamed. Not of you, of me, of what I thought it all meant. And then I didn't know how to come back." Nathan stepped closer. "And what now?" She looked up at him. His eyes held questions she didn't know how to answer. His closeness made her breath catch, but there was distance in him too. The kind that doesn't come from time, but from pain. "I don't know," she said honestly, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. Nathan's expression shifted, softened maybe, or hardened. She couldn't tell. "I loved you," he said quietly, "and maybe I still do. But love needs more than moments. It needs presence. You were gone when I needed you most." Tears stung at the corners of her eyes. "I know." She stepped forward just a little. Her hand reached for his, but he didn't meet it. Not this time. Behind them, Lauren's laugh echoed faintly. Samantha let her hand fall. "I guess I should go," she said. Nathan didn't stop her, didn't call after her, didn't say her name the way he used to. She walked out with her head high, heart trembling, and the cold clarity that sometimes timing isn't just wrong, it's brutal. But even as she reached the elevator, she couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't the end. Not yet, because something in his eyes had cracked. And some silences don't last forever. The elevator doors closed behind her with a quiet metallic sigh, but the echo of Nathan's silence followed Samantha all the way down. By the time she stepped out onto the street, the world outside felt louder. Cars honked, voices rose, sirens screamed in the distance. But inside her, everything was muted, like her soul had been dipped in glass. He hadn't stopped her, hadn't called her name, hadn't chased after her like he used to. And somehow that hurt more than any harsh word could. Samantha walked without a destination, letting the rhythm of her heels carry her through Midtown, past busy cafes and late commuters and blinking lights. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was too full of what-ifs, of the words she should have said sooner, of the hours she should have spent not in silence, but in apology. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky was turning a deep lavender, the kind of dusk that begged for reflection. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her purse on the counter and collapsed onto the couch, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning above her. Nathan was moving on. That truth settled over her like a second skin. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't vindictive, but she had pushed him away at his most vulnerable, and now he was protecting himself in the only way he could, by choosing someone else. Someone who didn't disappear. Someone who hadn't come back with empty hands and trembling eyes. The thought sliced through her. She opened her phone and stared at the last message he'd sent. "You never had to ask." She hadn't responded. She hadn't even said, "I'm sorry." Just "thank you." Just too little, too late. For a moment, she typed something new. "Do you still think about me?" Then deleted it. Typed again. "I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to show it." Deleted that too. In the end, she put the phone down and walked away. She started throwing herself into work with a kind of devotion that was almost violent. At Harrison, she quickly rose in respect. Colleagues sought her insight. Supervisors praised her efficiency. She stayed late most nights, not because she had to, but because the quiet hum of work numbed everything else. But no amount of spreadsheets or presentations could stop the ache that surfaced in the quiet hours. At night, when the city settled, she'd lie in bed and listen to the creak of the radiator or the ticking of the kitchen clock and wonder if he ever looked at his phone and thought of her. Sometimes she imagined him lying next to Lauren. Did he smile the same way? Did he still sleep with one arm above his head, one leg off the edge of the bed? Did he tell her the things he once only told Samantha? The jealousy was quiet, not angry, just mournful. Like watching someone else read the book you never finished writing. One evening, her colleague Ava knocked gently on her office door. "We're getting drinks at Thistle tonight. You should come." Samantha shook her head. "I have a deadline." "You always have a deadline." Ava hesitated. "You can't work your way out of heartbreak, Sam." Samantha looked up, startled. "I didn't say I was—" "You didn't have to," Ava said gently. "It's written all over your face. And in the way you keep trying to prove you're okay." Samantha didn't respond, but that night, after staring at her computer screen for an hour without typing a word, she shut the lid and changed into jeans and a sweater. At Thistle, she drank a glass of wine, then another. She laughed at jokes that didn't quite land, smiled at a man who smiled back. When he asked if she wanted to dance, she hesitated, then said yes. But as he placed his hand on her waist and leaned in to whisper something meaningless, Samantha's mind wandered. Back to the rooftop of Nathan's old apartment, back to his thumb tracing circles on her shoulder as they watched fireworks. Back to the way he once said, "You don't have to try so hard, you already are enough." The man spun her gently. She smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes, because moving forward wasn't the same as moving on. And healing wasn't a straight line. It was a spiral, one that brought her back again and again to the space he once filled. Back home, she stood at her bedroom window, staring at the Brooklyn Bridge lights twinkling in the distance. She whispered into the silence, "I hope you're happy," and meant it, even if it broke her a little more. The office was unusually quiet for a Thursday morning. Samantha sat in her glass-walled corner, fingers resting idly on the keyboard, her eyes fixed on a proposal draft that had refused to make sense for over an hour. It had been 6 months. 6 months since the Innovate collapse. 6 months since Nathan's last message. 6 months since she'd stood in his office and watched him not stop her. The pain had dulled, but never disappeared. Like a faded bruise on the soul, no longer fresh, but still sore when pressed. Samantha had learned to smile again, to speak with confidence in meetings, to answer emails without letting her heart stutter at names that weren't his. But on this particular morning, something shifted. It started with a knock at the glass door. Her assistant poked her head in, uncertain. "There's someone here to see you, no appointment." Samantha frowned. "Who?" The woman hesitated. "He said his name is Nathan Brooks." Samantha's heart stopped. Literally, for a second, she forgot how to breathe. "Send him in," she whispered. The door opened slowly, and there he was, not in a suit, not in his usual perfection. Nathan stood in dark jeans, a slate-grey t-shirt under a rain-damp jacket. His face was thinner. His eyes, still the same warm hazel, looked like they hadn't seen real sleep in weeks. He held a small folded piece of paper in one hand. The other stayed clenched at his side. She stood automatically, her voice nowhere to be found. "Hi," he said, soft but steady. "What are you doing here?" she managed. He stepped inside, closed the door gently behind him. "I wasn't sure you'd see me." "I almost didn't," she admitted. He nodded, glancing down at the paper in his hand, then back up at her. "I ended things with Lauren," he said simply. Samantha blinked. "What?" 3 months ago. "But I let people think what they wanted. It was easier than explaining why I couldn't love someone the way I loved you." Her knees weakened slightly. She sat down before they gave out. "Nathan, I thought I could move on," he continued. "I really did. I told myself I had to. That you'd made your choice. That I deserved to be with someone who chose me back." "You did," she whispered. "You still do." "But I kept hearing your voice," he said, stepping closer. "In every quiet room, in every song. I saw your shadow in every crowded place, and I tried to forget. God, I tried." Samantha swallowed hard, her hands trembling in her lap. "I wasn't ready," she said, "and by the time I thought you were gone." "I was gone," he said, "but I wasn't free." He unfolded the paper in his hand and passed it to her. It was a photo, old, faded, her and Nathan, teenagers, sitting on the edge of a rooftop with cheap soda cans in hand and the city glowing behind them. She had braces, he had ridiculous hair, they were laughing. "I've kept that for 16 years, he said. "It was the night I realized I loved you." Samantha's throat closed. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I never told you," he said, "because I was always afraid that if I told you, it would ruin everything." Her eyes welled with tears. "And I ruined it anyway." "No," he said softly. "We both did." Silence wrapped around them. Not cold this time, not distant, just full of everything that had never been said. She stood slowly, walked around the desk until she was right in front of him. "I'm not the same girl you fell in love with," she said. "I've made mistakes, I've been selfish. I shut you out when all you did was love me." "I don't want the girl I loved," he said, voice thick. "I want the woman you became because of everything you went through, even the parts that broke you." She looked up at him, tears threatening to spill. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted. "You don't have to," he whispered. "Just let me stay this time." Her hand found his. Fingers curled against familiar skin, and the dam broke. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, but she didn't pull away. He didn't wipe them. He just let her feel. Because love wasn't loud. It was this: presence, forgiveness, beginning again. He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead against hers. Breath to breath, heartbeat to heartbeat. "I'm still yours," he said, "if you'll have me." And Samantha closed her eyes, because part of her still didn't believe this was real. But all of her hoped it was. The rain gently tapped against the windows of the Brooklyn Heights penthouse, and the aroma of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mixed with the subtle scent of jasmine that Samantha always spritzed on her wrists in the morning. The city was still asleep, wrapped in a grey veil of mist and silence. She gazed out the window at the view, her hair loose around her shoulders, a mug in her hands, and her heart at peace. A year had passed since Nathan returned. A year since she had said yes, not with words but with the decision to stay, to begin again, to love with courage. Now they shared that spacious and cozy space, with windows opening to the world and enough room to breathe without losing each other. There were books scattered across the living room, recipes stuck to the fridge, laughter echoing on lazy Sundays, and the kind of silence that embraces rather than pushes away. Samantha had turned down the offer to take over a branch in Miami. The offer was tempting, financially absurd, but she didn't hesitate. Not this time. Time had taught her that not every promotion is worth the distance from the one who holds your hand when you wake up crying for no reason. She had been promoted right there in New York to regional director at Harrison. Now she led with empathy, vision, and strength, but she didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, not even to herself. Nathan, in turn, had begun stepping away from the pressures of his family's company. He sold his stake in the main holding and invested in something of his own, something smaller, more human, a social startup focused on public education and technological innovation. He said it was what allowed him to sleep in peace, and together they simply were. No rush, no masks, no desperate urgency to save something that had barely begun. On that rainy morning, Samantha didn't expect surprises. It was a Friday like any other. She had a meeting at 11 a.m., and Nathan had left early for the office. At least that's what he had said. But when she returned from the shower, a small box, wrapped in matte blue paper with a golden ribbon, rested on her pillow. Beside it, a note: "Do you still like promises?" Her heart stumbled. She sat on the edge of the bed with trembling hands and carefully untied the ribbon. Inside the box was an old ring, with a small oval diamond and a finely crafted white gold band. It was discreet, delicate, and absurdly familiar. When she held it between her fingers, she understood why. It was the ring from his adolescence, the one Nathan had once shown her in secret at 17 when he said, "I bought this at some fair. One day I'll give it to someone, if I'm brave enough." She laughed through her tears, unable to take a full breath. Before she could rise, the door to the room opened. Nathan was there, wet from the rain, hair dripping, eyes shining like the night he had said, "You're already enough." "You kept this," she whispered, showing him the ring. "For 15 years, he replied, stepping closer with slow, deliberate steps. "But it wasn't the right time. You weren't the woman standing before me now, and I wasn't the man who could keep up with you." She swallowed hard. And now? Now he knelt. No rush, no rehearsal. "Now I know that the most beautiful love doesn't come from certainty. It comes from choice, from the daily choice, to stay even when it's easier to run away." He took her hand, still damp from the shower, still trembling with emotion. "Will you be my home in this world, with all its imperfections? With everything we've been and everything we'll still become?" Samantha cried without making a sound, because she didn't need to, because every tear said yes. She nodded, laughing through her tears. "Of course I will, Nathan." He slid the ring onto her finger, not perfect, not new, but full of history, full of time, full of waiting. Then he hugged her, strong, long. Right there, in the silence between a proposal and a future, Their world began again. Not the way they imagined in youth, but better, more real, more mature, more human. They didn't need to heal to deserve love anymore. They had chosen each other to heal together. And that was the beginning of everything. Not every love story begins with a kiss, and not every reconciliation happens at the right time. But sometimes love endures, even when it's wounded, even when everything seems lost. Nathan waited. Samantha stayed silent. And in the end, it wasn't fate that brought them together. It was the courage to start over, even after everything. And you? Do you believe love can survive the silence? Or do you think when someone leaves, it's because they never truly wanted to stay? Tell us in the comments. Would you have waited like Nathan, or moved on? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know. Where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps this channel grow and keep bringing more emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs to believe in love again.